So you're building this out. This is the data warehouse. You're looking at this. Like, what are some other tools that you've used in building this? That so you talked about a couple of options, but what are some other connectors or anything else to mention there?
Yeah, it's pretty simple right now. It's literally all the connections, right? All the top funnel paid media kind of platforms across the board. Also, Klaviyo connects in, Attentive, all that kind of stuff. Post purchase surveys, we're building APIs over from post purchase surveys to feed that data in. Everything's pulled in through Airbyte. Airbyte goes over to Snowflake, stores into the Snowflake database, and then Snowflake database can kind of push anywhere, but MCPs over to Snowflake. They also have their own MCP on there, but we're feeding it back into Claude. Claude has so much information already about us because we've been so deep on it, right? Of kind of where the business stands and all that kind of stuff. So we're feeding it back over there and then basically running anything we want on top of Claude. But you're trying to, our goal as an agency is trying to cut down on the actual media buying part for our media buyers. I don't want people uploading creatives 40 hours a week. Like, that's not the
Mm.
goal here, right? If I can get them to spend 50% of their time in data and asking questions, and like, this is not a knock on media buyers, this is a knock on myself too. Obviously, I'm a media buyer. We are not always the top data scientist, most data analytic person, right, across the board. So if we can just ask simple questions and start to understand this data more, you're basically just empowering people to be able to make better decisions without having the guess of what they think is working or trying to, hey, this has click-through rate, here's frequency, here's this, right? We're just like, no, this is the ad that is driving the most people for the first touch point. This is the ad that is converting people.
What are just, this is an aside, but like, what are the metrics that you use most often that are actually correlated to results and growing a company that aren't the typical ones that you hear people talk about?
Everybody's on CPMR and stuff like that right now, which is just funny. It's always switching. The one we actually ran an analysis on everybody last year, and the number one indicator of a creative that ended up scaling was cost per added cart, which makes sense. It's a very simple, creative, but
Yeah.
you can get add to carts early and not get purchases early, right? And so it's just a higher top of funnel metric. If that is kind of in line with everything else seems to fall in line. There was not a click through rate analysis that ended up showing that was it, or CPMs, nothing like that. It was always cost per add to cart was the number one indicator of a good creative.
Nice. I sort of want to, Ange, if you don't mind, sort of go back to the database AI component, because I think that's really interesting. And I guess my question is sort of twofold. Like, how did you sort of land on each of those different touch points? Like, why did you pick Snowflake, for example? Was it just like a Claude recommendation, or did you see like an advantage there? And two, I think what folks maybe get confused or lost about, it's like, okay, I have all this great information. Like, I know what's performing now. Like, how do they sort of take that to the next step to actually generate ads that will work, right? Like, having the information is great, but like, what is that human next step to either iterate or build new concepts that will actually perform?
Yeah, so great question. As far as like, I mean, we went through a few steps here. First, we tried, and not trying to knock other companies, but we tried Supermetrics. It was too slow and it couldn't pull as granular data as we wanted. So went from Supermetrics, found Airbyte. We have a bunch of engineers we work with, so they were able to basically tell us, hey, Airbyte's a good one. Then databases, we were kind of going through in Snowflake, they have Cortex, which is their own AI model, right, on top of everything. So we were able to use the LLM on that, which was, just something that we wanted because I wasn't sure how MCPs would end up pulling in. So that was kind of like the first step of just finding what worked. Also, as weird as it sounds, we tried to go to the ones that like the big guys use because we knew if, an IPO'd company was pulling in 500 billion rows of data, we'd probably be relatively cheap to pull in 5 to 9 billion rows of data was my first thought process. I was like, we'd be the small guy over here. So I kind of wanted that as well because there'd be tools that, obviously they're using that we're not using. As far as like the action points on the data, there's a few ways to kind of go about this. One, you already have this creative feedback loop, right? One thing we've always looked at is like, does the model work? Yes or no? Because we'll take the same exact script and give that to 15 models and it'll always come back to like, this model works or this model works, right? So that's one way of just like starting to bucket the data into basically digestible places for you to say, hey, here's the top model, here's the top hook, here's the top, for example, we run a jewelry company. This is the top background. They switched from all white backgrounds to all black backgrounds in February because we found out that worked better. All of their top creators are black backgrounds right now. So like simple things like this, if you like start to bucket things, I think you can have like paralysis by analysis and go too deep here for sure. But the end all be all here is probably feed this analysis over to creative briefing, have the creative brief, do the analysis on, or take that analysis and then write the briefs for your creative strategist on top of that, have them kind of check it, but just basically speed up the workflow across the board. Nothing's 100%, things probably 70 to 80%, with that last 20 to 30% being the human touch point. But